Hi, Leticia. Welcome to Spainly Living.
Hello, Michelle. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Let's get right into it. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are and where you moved from?
I am Leticia Fonseca. I am originally from Brazil, but I came to the UK and lived there for 21 years. So it's a long time for living in one place. And I thought I was going to spend more than half of my life in England, but that wasn't the case. And then I escaped before it happened. I am a financial advisor by profession, and I'm a financial educator by mission. And I help primarily women navigate through money matters, but primarily and most importantly, building a retirement plan that they can trust and live by whenever they like.
Amazing. And where did you move to in Spain? What prompted you to move to Spain?
Right. I am in Alicante, which is a much smaller city than London. And I chose Alicante. That was one of the reasons because you can do so much in one day. And but I'm sure I'll be telling you more about why I chose Alicante at some point.
Well, why did you choose Spain? Let's start there.
Right. So let's go back a few steps. I believe it was 2021. My husband and I decided to travel to Andalusia. So we hired a car and went, visiting different cities. And we enjoyed the experience so much that we said, you know what? We both can work remotely. Why can't we come sometime in spring and spend 3 months in Granada, which at the time was our favorite place to be? And next year came, we couldn't find a place to stay in Granada for 3 months. And then we went to Portugal. We ended up in Setúbal and we really enjoyed the experience. And it was so cheap living there. We were living like kings, going to expensive then, right? Expensive restaurants and having a great time and going to the beach every day and having like kind of like a semi-retired life. And we decided to do this the following year. So the following years we went to, where did we go? We went to Brazil one day, one time, and then we came back to Spain. And then we thought, do you know what? We want to move somewhere else and try to live somewhere that we can have a better work-life balance and enjoy the town, enjoy living because as you know, in London, we just, and that was an observation that I made at the time. In London, we live to work. Here, people work to live. They work
Mm,
because they have to, but the most important thing
mm,
to them is to live life. And then I thought that's what I want to do of my life. And this is something that people dream of. They dream of when I
mm,
retire, when I am 65, I'm going to go and live in Spain. Then I thought, but why can't we do this now? And that's when we started very slowly planning our heads and visiting places to see where we would fit best. And we actually got a mortgage accepted in Portugal. But the amount of money we're going to borrow was so high that I had cold feet and I thought, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go for it. And then I remember it was on a Friday. I had this mortgage agreement and I thought, I'm not in peace with that. My heart is not in peace with that. It's a huge amount of money for me to borrow. But I'm going to sleep. I'm going to sleep on it. And tomorrow morning I'll make a decision. And before I went to bed, I spoke to a friend and I said, I think you know somebody in Spain and would you pass me her contact? Somebody who deals with property. And then I went to sleep. The next day, I saw the message. It said, Zenilda Alicante. And I thought, I didn't ask for that much. You gave me the name and the city, Alicante, here I come. So I came here and I fell in love with the place straight away. So in my first visit ever, was already looking at properties.
amazing. That's so
Yeah.
cool. We were looking at Portugal as well because my family are Portuguese and we thought we love the culture. We have family there. But what I found is that what we were looking for didn't really match in Portugal. So we were looking for a city and a beach and potentially hiking. We love hiking. I've gone cross country hiking all over Europe. And for me, it's about being able to be in nature. And In Portugal, what we found is that there were cities and there were beach towns, but there wasn't really a city beach town. So Lisbon, the beach is quite far away.
Yeah.
In Porto, the weather's quite cold. So it was trying to find a city and a beach that matched our needs and expectations, right? And ideally, we wouldn't want to drive; we'd prefer to walk. So when we got to Alicante, I discounted the whole of southern Spain because for me, I want a beach, but I also want nature. I want green. So I discounted it because I thought, oh, it's all just a desert. I'm not about the insane heat.
Yeah.
I like a nice, easy life. I want it to be nice and, cool, like just temperate weather and not too
Yeah.
hot, not too cold. Like I just want perfection. That's what my aim is. And I think when we got here, what we found is that everywhere there's going to be a compromise. But we found it was such a beautiful mix of beaches, different kinds of beaches, beaches to suit everyone, big beaches, little beaches, rocky beaches, soft beaches, everything you could find. And then also the city had everything. Like it was like a little mini city with everything. So you could have meals out that are like from Asia, Middle East, Africa. There was all these kind of different mix of cultures. And then the last thing is that the hills and the area just outside of Alicante was amazing for hiking. And the weather is amazing all year round, except for July and August when it's a furnace. And what we found is that like most people just leave. And the other thing that I found the difference between Portugal and Spain, I don't know if you've found the same thing, but it feels like there's a lot more properties available in Spain as opposed to Portugal, and the properties tend to be slightly cheaper than in Portugal because of that availability issue. Also, I think Spain is just slightly more set up in terms of infrastructure for foreigners, right? So generally they have good public transport links. Generally they have really good schools and even international schools. So I think that they're just, I mean, Portugal's there, but I think Spain is just a little bit ahead in terms of the things we were looking for at the time. What did you find?
I agree. And it feels like Alicante is an upgrade from Setúbal because Setúbal has everything that you mentioned there, apart from the right infrastructure. Because we were staying there, and although it was 30 minutes from Lisbon, sometimes the trains weren't running. It was difficult for you to move around. In Spain, we have the tram that goes all along the Costa Blanca, and it's so easy to get to Madrid. The infrastructure is so much more robust than it was in Setúbal. We hired motorbikes and cars when we were in Setúbal, but in Alicante, you don't have to. You have so much
Yeah.
transport and ways to go different places and visit cities. I say that everything's 20 minutes from Alicante. The airport is 20 minutes. Everything's 20 minutes because you can get to places so easily and there's choices of ways. So for me, Alicante was quite a sizable upgrade from different from Setúbal, and Setúbal is beautiful. There's so many beaches and places for you to hike, but the infrastructure is not there. And I thought I'm going to be stuck somewhere. And yeah, and it felt like it was a city that had been forgotten. And Alicante is so modern, and the restaurants are amazing. I can name better restaurants in Alicante than I can in London, and I've been here for 2 minutes.
Absolutely. The food scene here is insane. And that's what we found is we've actually got a local friend who we met who is so into food and so are we. So he takes us as on a little food tour every, couple of weekends and we
We
go
need to
and see these places. We'll need to link up.
We definitely need to exchange our recommendations.
Yeah, yeah. And so there is a lot. I think that it does offer a lot. And I really like the fact that you mentioned like a semi-retirement because we always joke to ourselves as well that we feel like we're almost semi-retired because we do run our own business. We're able to just sort of dictate our time. The opposite of that though is that a lot of the time we're working, right? So it doesn't matter if you're sick, it doesn't matter if you have childcare, it doesn't matter if it's school holidays, you're working, right? So you have to account for the fact that you don't really get time off. You mentioned that both yourself and your partner were able to work remotely. What's enabled that? Can you talk through the structure and how you figure that out?
Sure. And I have to say, there's a little bit of a disclaimer. I definitely use this time that we spend. Now we're going to Brazil to spend 2 months there. I use the time to compensate all the holidays I don't take throughout the year, all the weekends that I work. So when I do travel, I work like 20% and I enjoy 80% of the time. And, but my husband works in marketing, and I founded a Master of Finances 7 years ago, which is my education company. And then now I'm also an advisor. And so I have the authorization from the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK, to work remotely as long as I only target individuals who actually live in the UK, who are taxpayers in the UK. So as long as I stay inside this, I can work from anywhere in the world. And my education business is what opened the doors for me to be able to work from anywhere in the world, because also I can help and guide anybody from anywhere in the world. Although the advice business is more restricted, but the education business, I work with banks in Spain, banks in Japan, different banks to educate their workforce, and they are all over the world. So I can do this from anywhere. And when I started Master of Finances, when I really started, because in 2019, when I started, I was really focusing a lot still in studying. But then in 2020, I was going to have my first in-person event. And then the pandemic came. I had to actually start doing everything online. And I got used to doing everything online. And in one of my past lives, I worked for British Telecom, and I used to work with conferences, virtual conferences. And, everything that I learned then, I could apply in my business. And make my clients used to, you don't see me, but I'm here. And eventually I do
Mm.
see them, but I got them used to dealing with me online and letting them know that I'm not there in person, but I am available. I don't know if I answered your question. I hope I did.
Absolutely. And I think that that's a really important point to make. People, they're sitting in their office or in their stodgy apartment in London, and they're thinking, come on, man. Surely I can do that. Surely I can do my job and not have to deal with the tube and the people and the weather. And I can just literally do my job. And then on my free time, I can go do the things I like to do. I can go to the beach. I can sit in the sun. I can go to a cafe, enjoy some time with my friends, eat some really amazing food. But the thing is that the chasm sometimes of where they feel like they are and where they want to get to is so vast. And it feels like such a difficult journey. And to be fair, it is a challenging journey, right? Moving to another country, particularly if you don't speak the language or if there are other challenges, it's hard, right? Just the visa approval process, everything, it can beat you down. And then once you're here, then being treated like a foreigner, it's hard. But I think there is a way. And the purpose of the podcast is to tell people, to show people how we did it, so that in that they can find their little nuggets of truth and their way forward to understand how they can do this for themselves. And we always joke that we're almost semi-retired, not because we don't work. You still work, like you were saying. You don't have a holiday, but you have moments where you're working less, which is helpful.
Exactly.
But I really like, yeah, and I like the fact that you've pulled on all of your experience. So this job that you're doing right now doesn't have to be just this job. It's everything, a culmination of everything you've learned before.
That is right. And I remember when I was in between careers, not only jobs, in between careers, I thought, do you know what? And I think that was like 15 years ago, when I was working in sales and looking for what I wanted to do when I grew up. Because at the time, I was between a role in sales and in marketing. But I thought, what I want to do, I want to have a job that I can travel. And I was focused on that. But I absolutely detest packing and I detest airports. And then now I understand what I wanted then was to be able to work from anywhere, not necessarily travel for work, but be working while I travel. And I remember a few years later, and that thought never left me. And I remember a few years later going to holiday in Crete, in Greece. And I saw there was this beautiful island, this beautiful resort, and people working. And I thought, what on earth can I do to have this life? And that everything starts with you wanting to do something and daring to dream. Now I have geographic freedom. And then I'm also chasing financial freedom, and you accomplish one thing at a time. And then I have corporate freedom, because I have my own company. So what are the kinds of things that you can do today to bring this retirement forward in your life? It could be small things. It could be our 2 months away from the UK. It could be being able to work while you're traveling, this kind of things. And then you
Mm.
build up from there. What are the other kinds of freedom that you want? As you know, I'm chasing for financial freedom. But before that happens, there is for example, a turning point when your money grows faster than the money that you're putting in. These are the kind of small steps that happen along the way before you achieve the big thing that you're trying to achieve. In my case, is financial freedom. So there are lots of little steps before that you can aim for.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important. What you just shown is that you've really thought about that previously. You've thought about it in terms of what do I want? And I think people generally start on like, when I'm at the beach, I'll be happy. When I'm here, I'll be happy. And I think it's about really deciding what do you want and then being very clear about what the priorities are on what you want. We can have everything, but we can't have everything at once all of the time. So you have to decide what are your priorities, where you're gonna start. And I like the fact that you've designated, I'll start with geographical freedom. I'll start with being able to have the freedom to be anywhere so that you kind of like, I think they call it slow travel or something like that, where you go
Never heard.
somewhere and you work from there. Yeah. And then you go to the next location. It's like a digital nomad, but slower. And that's rather quite cool as well. But I think it's like the way that you explain the priorities is really clear because you can tackle one thing at a time and then move on to the next thing and the next thing. Can you explain as well a little bit more clearly, what it is that you do professionally? Because you mentioned you do educational piece, you do a financial advising piece. Can you explain that more clearly?
Sure, absolutely. So the advisory work, it's clear to most people. And imagine, and so I'm going to tell how I separate clients so you understand clearly. So there's the financial advice, which most people understand. It's people who have lump sum some money that they want somebody else to manage for them. And it's because they think it's very risky for them to manage themselves. Also, because there is a professional like me who is always, studying. I have to do over 36 hours of training every year. Otherwise, I lose my license. So I'm always on top of what's going on in the economy and in terms of taxation and law and everything like that in the UK. So then I can manage and also grow my clients' wealth. And it's regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. But the education business, and for an advisor to take you on board, we're paid by commission. At least I am paid by commission. And if you don't have a big lump sum of money, the amount of paperwork that you need to do is so vast that it's not worth our time. So only 9% of the individuals in the UK are having financial advice for two reasons. Number one, because it could be that they don't have enough money, and they even say it, I can't afford a financial advisor. It's because they don't have the lump sum required to pay for a financial advisor. Most financial advisors in the UK require you to have at least £250,000 to invest to make it worth their while. But then I thought, what about if nobody helps these people to reach this 250K? How are they going to get in the first place? How are they going to get there? So that's where the financial educator starts their work. I work with people who have £100 to invest. But then what I do is I teach them to start DIY investing, doing it themselves so they can build their wealth it's going to get to some point that it's going to be too risky for them to manage and lose. So imagine losing 250,000 or losing because you make the wrong choice £100. So the
Mm.
cost and the risks are much lower. And that's why I teach people to invest, and then they join this journey of building wealth and also, incorporating habits and being able to make better financial decisions and being able to coordinate their financial lives. Because buying a property, building retirement, and saving, they're not isolated things. They have all to be connected to make sense and to work for people in terms of taxation, in terms of building an income for the future. Everything has to be joined up. And what I see a lot of people is that they have pockets of investments, pockets of retirement, pockets of property, and nothing talks to each other. And that's how I can help as a financial educator or as a financial advisor. And I also have clients who do both. I have clients who don't have any money invested and they learn to invest with me. And also they have built a pension pot, actually several pension pots most of the time. And then we're going to combine them to make sure they are at the right risk level and they're going to be producing the returns this person needs to be able to retire when they want to retire. So it's a much more complex kind of work and it's more risky to deal with pensions, but it can be done. And the later people will leave to make that decision, the more returns they're losing along the way. Because, I have a client who started at the age of 59, but she wants to be able to retire at the age of 63, but she doesn't have a lot of time when compound interest is going to help her. And if you start in your 30s and 40s, you have a long way to build. And also you have choices. So
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I think the difficulty on that, what I've seen, is that people in their 20s who have the time don't have the money to invest, and people in their 60s who don't have the time have the money to invest. And I think that's the difficulty that you find. And I really like the fact that when you're consulting and advising, you're limited to the UK because of the regulation. But the other people who maybe don't have the money to invest, but potentially have the time, I love the fact that you're educating them to DIY these solutions and then also to kind of use your experience and wealth of knowledge to be able to build that wealth for themselves. That's really cool. Getting back to Spain, though, do you want to walk us through what the process was like for you in practical terms when you moved to Spain?
we started a process. So we are now mid 2026. Our process started in August and we only got a visa in March. So that's how long it took. And this huge length of time was driven primarily by the UK, believe me or not, by HMRC, because I asked for a certificate called A1 to allow me to work from abroad because I couldn't set up my company here. I can't run a financial advisory company is regulated by the UK. I can't set it up in Spain, as far as I know, right? So it had to be out of the UK. And for that, I needed authorization from the HMRC for me to continue to pay Social Security, i.e., national insurance contributions. And then I needed this form. But I completed the wrong form and then I completed the right form. But they said there was a 6 month waiting list. And I spent 4 months calling them nonstop every day to find out the status. They messed it up. It was a mess, it was a real mess. And everybody was saying, no, try it different. But that was the only route I had. And my husband at the time, his company wasn't old enough to apply. So he's my dependent. So the whole process was, um, you know, tied up to this. And we came here in December, January, hoping that we would be able to apply for the visa because we had to be in Spain to apply. But then we left without having the right letter from HMRC to be able to apply. And then we had to return to Spain just for a week to apply for the visa before we could finally move in April. So we got the visa in March. And then 3 weeks later, we're here, we moved. But we would have liked to do this, in December, way before, 4 months before. But thanks to HMRC, we couldn't do it. So it was very difficult and extremely expensive because I had to prove that I could support my husband and I. I had to increase my salary, not only dividends, but salary. Because of that, I was left with a huge tax bill, which I'm going to be paying for until March next year. It was very tough.
Wow. And what would you have done differently in terms of that process if you'd known that that could happen, that it could take so long?
Yeah, and although we paid for a consultant to help us, I think I would have, because at the time we had tenants living in our apartment, and we asked them to leave, thinking that we would, they would leave and then we would straight move in. But they left a month after, and they had 3 months notice. They left a month after. So the apartment was empty from September to April when we moved in. So we had to pay two mortgages. That was one of the things. I would only give them notice when I was sure that I was going to move. That was one of the things, because then we could potentially pay rent for, I don't know, a couple of months if we needed. But then we had to pay two mortgages. That was one of the things. The second thing is I wasn't quite aware of how messy HMRC could be, because they really messed up the paperwork, not only delayed, but messed up. And the forms were not very clear, because there's like different in difference in acronyms, and you don't really know, because the form is called A1. What does that mean?
Mm,
You know?
mm,
So I would have waited for this form to come through in order to know exactly when I could move. Because what happened was, because I said to HMRC that I was going to move here in January, they dated my permit to live in Spain from January, but I actually got a visa in March and I moved in April. So I missed 4 months of visa. So instead of having
mm.
2 years to stay on a digital nomad visa, I have, when is it, 20 months. So that is really
Mm,
tough. So I would have done that differently if I knew that it was going to be so much in the hands of the UK government as opposed to the Spanish government, because the visa
yeah.
itself was quite quick. When we applied, 3 months 3 weeks later we had a visa. So it was very simple. But the paperwork and all the money that we had to spend to translate, to not like do the notary, and have insurance, and I have to pay for a year's insurance. And, there's so much cost involved,
Yeah.
plus paying two mortgages.
Yeah, yeah. We found that the move was much more expensive than we thought, also because of all these additional costs. So in our case, it wasn't as complex because we are EU citizens. We should be able to live here, right? But even that process was very, very expensive because you have to get appointments, you have to prove that you have the income, so you have to have a certain amount of money in the bank. And you also, I think our insurance, our health insurance that you have to have for a year for our whole family was about £2,500,
Yeah,
which is a
same
lot of
here.
money. And we didn't think that all of these costs will come up front. Small things like having to rent a car and having to pay additional deposit, because also to rent an apartment here, you have to pay an additional deposit. So there's a lot of cost that we maybe didn't factor in. We just thought, oh, actually, cost of living is quite substantially cheaper than in the UK, but there's a lot of additional costs, upfront costs that you need to consider.
Yeah, it's like you're investing in a cheaper lifestyle, but you have to invest in advance. So we're hoping that in the long run, this will pay off. But if we have to leave in 20 months, I'm not sure the cost will even be even then. So we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I think on a daily basis, it kind of makes it worth it. For us, at least, it's worth it that we can go in the morning and sit on the beach and have a conversation and then get to work. I think for us, for our life, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
At least that's for my family. So it seems like everything that you've gone through was quite difficult in preparation of moving to Spain. When you got here and you decided, okay, Alicante is the place I want to be, I'm going there. What was the process of finding a place to rent and settling in Alicante? What was that process like?
Yeah. This was the easy part for us, because this
Okay.
friend of ours, which coincidentally moved a month after we moved. So she lived in London for like 25 years, and she had a property here for 14, and then she decided to move to Alicante. So I was so lucky for that. But because of this friend, she introduced us to a property consultant. She's not a state agent and she's not a mortgage broker. She's a consultant. She's like in the middle, and she knew everything about Alicante and everything about the property market. And this was easy, like a piece of cake. It was a walk in the park. It was so easy because she knew the areas, she knew where we would, invest. When we bought the property, I understood that I didn't want, they call it, what is it? What's the word? Apartamento de origen, like piso de origen, which is these properties that were built 50 years ago that you have to renovate everything. So we bought a property that had already been renovated, but we just needed to redecorate and stuff. So we got somewhere in the middle. We didn't get something that was perfectly ready to live in. We could have, but these walls were lime green. So I couldn't live here, So all we needed to do is to paint and put fans and, modernize it a little bit. And even before we moved in, the property was already valued 30K more than we paid for, So we made very good decisions because we had a property consultant with us. And I had already made a lot of mistakes with my property in London, which I wasn't prepared to do here. So it was very easy because she took us to do our NIE. She took us to the bank to, you know, to do the mortgage. She knew the area. She helped us negotiate. She helps us with everything. So this was the easy part. I didn't have any trouble, but I do hear some people have a lot of problems, which we didn't have, and we were very blessed because we had her.
I think we need to get an introduction to the consultants
Definitely.
to introduce our viewers to somebody who could help them on the ground, because there are a lot of challenges that you can come up against when you actually, arrive. Can I ask you, was there anything that you did before the move that you really happy that you did? So you mentioned you wish you'd gotten the certificate first and those kinds of things, but is there anything that you did that prepared you really well for the move?
I thought this question was so important that I made notes. So the first one is, in one of our trips, we went to Mexico for 3 weeks because our plan number one was to buy a finca. And we went visiting different places. We stayed in different places to understand the business model. But when we thought, why are we going to buy a finca in Alicante if we can't live there? How, it's going to be cost that, you know, but that was our plan number one. So we went to Mexico, and I studied Spanish 25 years ago when I was still at university. But that Spanish that I spoke then helped me navigate through Mexico. And it was really extremely helpful to speak Spanish. And ever since 2023, I've been studying Spanish on a daily basis. And every chance I have, I practice. And because of that, I was able to, with the help of Zenilda, of course, I was able to. But I said, when people say, do you speak Spanish? And I said, speak enough to buy a property, you know? And I think speaking the language, even though I don't consider myself very good because my standards are very high, I speak enough to be able to get by. And I think it would really stress me out if I didn't speak any Spanish. So my husband gets so frustrated because he doesn't. But I think speaking the language has made a massive difference to my journey. And obviously planning financially to be here really helped too, because what I did, I saved enough to invest for when I'm no longer a tax resident in the UK. But at the same
Mm.
time, I can also continue contributing towards my pension in the UK. So these kind of things make a huge difference because I'm not going to be able to contribute to my individual savings account, my ISA in the UK anymore because I'm not a tax resident. So
Mm.
these small things I think make a massive difference. And also coming to Spain before joining Facebook groups. I'm looking at my notes, speaking to people and learning about the things how you can make your life easy. And yeah, these are my tips, I think.
Absolutely. I think joining Facebook groups is really important as well, because I think I've met a lot of really incredible people, but really good communities through those groups. And I think it is something to do with what, when you're an expat, it does feel like you're really kind of this boat alone on an ocean. And when you find other people who are kind of going through similar situations or experiences, it's really helpful to be able to have these people in your lives who can create that community. So absolutely, I agree with you. And I think the speaking the language part is a big one. I mean, because our family are Portuguese, we have a base of Portuguese, but it's not very good. And so the Spanish is also even worse than that. And I have found that it's very difficult to do things if you don't know Spanish. Maybe it's a bit different if you're in a bigger city, potentially Barcelona or something like that. But I do find that it's quite hard to get around without knowing Spanish, at least colloquially. Uh, and a lot of the differences as well in the UK and I presume in the US as well. A lot of things are done via email and a written form, whereas here everything is either a phone call or on WhatsApp. And that's what's difficult is because you can't even translate that, right? You can't even use apps to translate and to understand. And a lot of the times when I will call, even to book a appointment, medical appointment for our son or dentist or really anything, if you speak English, people just get frustrated and put the phone down because I mean, I get it. If someone was talking to me in another language, I would also not understand it. But that can be very frustrating. And it feels sometimes like you just can't get anything done, which is quite frustrating when you need to get something done.
Yeah,
So absolutely.
and I even learned that actually happens so many times that I'm sure is part of the culture slash language. If you don't ask the Spanish exactly what you were looking for, they're not going to tell you. Just to give you an example of something that was extremely hard to do that we gave up. For over 2 weeks, we are trying to transfer the internet from our consultant's name to our name, the internet from the house we live. So the payment was coming from our account, but it was under her name because we didn't have a tier, so we couldn't contract the internet. But it proved to be impossible. It was impossible to transfer the internet from her name to our name. And after 2 weeks, they said, you have to send identification, you know, documents. So I sent my passport, I sent my NIE, and they kept saying, passport is not valid, NIE is not valid. And then I'd send my UK driving license, and then I sent my Brazilian passport. And then they said, these documents are not valid. Until I had the idea, I have to ask them, what documents are valid? Because they're saying to me, what is not valid? What do you want? And then they told me I needed a tier. But it happened so many times that they say, this is not possible, but they don't tell you what is possible. Do you know what I mean? If you don't
Right.
ask.
Yeah, that's a good example. I think there's a lot of those kinds of things. We were trying to buy a car recently and I said, "Okay, great. I'd like to buy the car." And he said, "Okay, I'll send you the documentation on Monday." And on Monday I was like, "Great, where's the documentation?" He's like, "Oh no, someone already reserved it on the weekend." And I said, "What are you talking about? I reserved it on the weekend." He's like, "Oh no, you didn't pay the reservation fee." He didn't tell me that you have to reserve it or that I thought by saying, "Hey, I want to buy the car," that was reserving it. No, there's another process that they won't tell you about it. So there are these lessons that you learn as you go along, but it is what it is. Well, on that vein, was there anything about the move that you felt was harder than you had expected it to be? I mean, discounting what you've already spoke about, but was there anything in particular that you can make people aware of?
Yeah. By the time we ended up having to cancel that internet and contract a new one in our name, because then, we just couldn't do this. Uh, But I think not having a Spanish number, it's impossible for you to do anything. It's really, really difficult. So when you come here, find a way to get a mobile phone or a Spanish number straight away, because so when we contracted internet, we didn't have a number. We contracted internet, but my husband speaking to somebody in English over the phone, the person understood the house letter, a different letter to ours. It was supposed to be D, and the person understood B, which is right in front of our door. The person went there to install the internet. They said, no, it's not here. That person turned around and left. and didn't even bother to send an email because the number that they could see was an English number. So they didn't bother to call or even send an email to say, hey, I couldn't find it. Did you give us the wrong address or something like that? And, the days were passing. I thought this is taking rather long. And then realized that the service had been cancelled. So these are the kind of things that I would definitely recommend that you do. But the other thing is people here really appreciate you being friends with them, and they appreciate, I'd say, I don't know if the word is authority, but you showing that they are the authority. I'm talking about concierge in in my apartment. When we moved, the guy made our life very difficult. And I think it was because we didn't say, sir, I appreciate that you are the concierge and you own this building, but we're just trying to move, and he was walking behind us to make sure we are not doing anything that he wasn't happy with, and going to a bank. People here go to banks to open a bank account. So if the bank manager doesn't think you're good enough, then they're not going to open the account for you. That doesn't happen in the UK. You just go online and open an account. But here
Yeah.
we had to be introduced to the bank manager to be able to open an account. These little things really matter in Spain.
Yeah, that's so helpful. Thank you. Because we have found exactly the same thing. When we came here with our UK numbers, we would order something even from Amazon or from an online retailer, and it just wouldn't arrive. And they don't tell you that it hasn't arrived. You have to find out and have to hunt. And thankfully on Amazon you can check online, and it kept saying that we refused delivery. We refused delivery. And we were like, well, no, we need the delivery. That's why we asked for the delivery. And it turned out that we had a UK number on there. And so when they couldn't get hold of us, they just decided, "No, sorry, they've refused it." So having a Spanish number is really important. Something that struck me was obviously in the UK, we have, I had almost 12 years of credit history built up. So for me to get a contract for a phone, for a SIM card was super easy. I could walk into anywhere and they'd give me a contract. Here, they don't give you a contract for a phone. You've got to pay the month on month fee, which is about, I think it's about €30 for those sort of standard SIM contracts on month fee. And I just thought, well, that's a bit much, right? If we just want a number that people can reach us on, because you can get it like a £10 contract for the same thing in the UK. So there are things that you come up against, and you just have to find a way. And it is absolutely what you say. It's not just the bank; it's everything. Everyone wants to either have an in-person conversation or a phone conversation. When you don't speak Spanish, that's very challenging. It's also very time consuming if you have to go there in person. And then the other thing is people generally they want you to like have this difference for them. There's this sort of culture of like, I need to feel respected
Hierarchy.
and I need to feel above you. And it's really weird because even with this car sales situation, I was like, hi, can you give me a report to say that because we're buying the car remotely, which in itself is a very foreign concept here. The man told me in 28 years that's never happened. So that's very interesting. I've bought several cars remote. But anyway, and he's like, you got to be here to assess the car. I'm like, I'm not a mechanic. There's nothing I can do. I can see the car, but I can't tell you it's working. So can you give me the report, please, to show me that it's working? And he gives me a report. The VIN number doesn't match the car's VIN number. And I was like, this is a scam, And when I told him like, hey, it has to be accurate, right? And then he got really upset with me. So we're not going to be buying the car from this guy. But it was one of those things where it's like, this doesn't have to be this challenging, right? I have the money. I want to buy the thing. Can you just give me the thing? And the thing is the right thing that you say it is. It's those kinds of things that are really challenging. And I think that if we'd gone there in person and I spent the time and I spoke Spanish and called him sir and all these kinds of things, maybe this would have been a different experience. It's just that's a cultural thing. I think in at least in South Africa where I grew up, you see that sometimes if you have to go to like government departments, if I have to go to get a passport or something, then yeah, everybody's on a power trip, and it just takes ages. But I think it's one of those things like in the UK that's non-existent. Like you just do the thing, right? Whereas here it feels like you have to, you have to almost like have this insider knowledge. Like they have to introduce you to their friend who's the bank person, and you've got to know everybody. Otherwise, you just not going to get to do the thing that you need to do.
Yeah. And I also think it could be that the language has formal and informal. And in
Mm.
Portuguese, at least in Brazil, you don't really have that. Obviously, you're going to treat everybody with respect, but you don't have a verb to refer to a person. Like here, they say caballero, and then and and señora, and they all conjugate the verb accordingly, and more formal. But I find this rather odd. And sometimes when you go to these public sector places, it's like they're doing you a favor, and you have to be like, yes sir, no sir, yes sir. Do you know what? I find this bizarre. By the way, we contracted our phones via the internet, and for €35 we got two phone lines plus internet, so it was very cheap.
Yeah, once we got the internet, we got the phone lines too. But for them to give us the internet, they need to do a credit check. They need to have all the documentation. So those first few weeks of being able to just get another phone number, a Spanish phone number, is very difficult. But I agree. We did the same thing through our internet. We got the phone lines, which was really helpful. Can I ask you, have you learned since moving to Spain? Not only about the move to Spain, mentioned the fact that it's expensive to move to Spain and it might not work out in the end. But what has your experience been so far? Would you do it again?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I would say I, when I told my husband and we decided, and everybody says to me that I'm very lucky to have an English husband who is uh, keen on living in other countries. And to begin with, I wouldn't have married him if he wasn't. When I first met him, he lived in Amsterdam, being English and living in Amsterdam, and I was Brazilian living in the UK. So that's for starters. And we also, this is an investment. This is an investment in our mental health, in our day-to-day lives. And it is difficult. It is very expensive. And I think because of these two reasons, a lot of people don't go for it. But it is like with anything else. If it was easy, everybody would do it, right? And I think we had, and I think you do too, this little bug that bother us, and we have to be moving. And people say, are you going to stay here forever? And I said, the only thing I committed to doing forever is to be married to my husband. And I can't even guarantee I'm going to be with him forever. What I can do is that I'm committed to stay here for the 20 months that I'm allowed to. But from there, I don't know. Don't ask me to
Mm.
commit to stay anywhere. But I would do it all over again. Obviously, I would adjust a few things along the way because I learned a lot. And that's what I say to people. That is why we have mentors, people have consultants, because then you can pay somebody to transfer the knowledge to you, and you're not going to pay with money and time for something that you can just cut corners by paying for somebody's time to do it for you. But I'll definitely do it again.
Amazing. I think we're in the same boat. So it wasn't easy. I think when we had just moved, everyone talks about the honeymoon period, but I think that was the worst because you're in this position where you're like, look what we've given up and the stability we've given up for the instability. And then also generally apartments are quite small and potentially you're in the situations like, what have we done? We've given away everything that we owned to move somewhere, and it's not quite what we imagined. But I think there's a lot that Spain offers, and I think just geographically for us, we always wanted to move somewhere where we had the beach and and the ocean and the city and everything. But because of the work we do with systems and tech, we have access to a lot of data, and we have to be somewhere where there's a data adequacy decision so that we can process the data in those jurisdictions. And so for us, Europe was kind of where it needed to be. I think we would have looked further afield. We were exploring like Kuala Lumpur in Asia, or potentially Macau or Hong Kong or something. But it's very difficult to be able to do that when you're kind of curtailed with what you do. And for us, Spain and where we are seems the closest to Cape Town, where I'm from. And I think it was just that kind of thing where I think you have to find the place that's right for you. And then it becomes a bit easier to take up the challenges relating to how you get there. And so to close off, what would the advice be that you would give to a friend who said, um, Letitia, I'm looking to move to Spain.
Mhm.
Tell me everything. Give us a few pointers.
I think people need to be very clear on the reason why they're moving. And it's with anything, right? What's the reason why you want to have a business? And you always need to be going back to this why you want. And by the way, our honeymoon was terrible. We didn't have a honeymoon because I was just stressed, very stressed. I had nervous breakdown here because of the internet. But you need to be very clear on the reasons why you are doing it, because there will be moments that things will be very, very tough. These are the things. Be very clear on why you're doing it, budget properly, and outside of this budget, add 30% on top because you will need it. And as soon as you arrive and in the place, or even before, if you can, focus on learning the language, because this is going to make your life so much better in this place, and connect with people as soon as possible, because being social helps with your mental health, with your health in general. So these are the four things I would say that you definitely need to do to be able to succeed as a digital nomad or as an expat somewhere. We are the ex-expat, aren't we? And I just have to say that I am forever grateful for everything that London gave me, for everything that was able to build there, because I always say that in London you can be anywhere, anybody you want. You have so many opportunities. I'm so grateful. But the person who left London was no longer the person who arrived there in the first place. I changed so much, and my needs changed, and my goals changed. And that's why I felt, I don't fit here anymore. So where,
Mm,
and find in the place that this new you would fit and would be happy to live, because we don't have to be in one place for our entire lives.
yes, absolutely true. Tisha, thank you so much for your time today. I think this has been such a lovely conversation, and I'm sure it will help loads of people.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and I hope you enjoy this conversation.